That night, Addy was awakened suddenly by a noise out in the street. She didn't know what it was at first. Papa had already jumped up from the bed. He was looking out the window. "What's all that fuss out there?" Mama asked sleepily. Addy was fully awake by then. She heard 3 big booms that rattled the panes of the window. "That's cannon fire," Papa said. "It's got to be coming from the harbor." Suddenly there were more booms, and then popping noises that sounded like shots cracking through the air. "Maybe the war's come to Philadelphia," said Mama with alarm. Papa started to answer, but the sound of people cheering, whistles blowing, and church bells ringing drowned out his words. Addy's heart started beating faster. All this noise, and at this time of night. "I bet I know what's happened," Addy thought. She jumped out of bed and joined Papa at the window. Down below, the street was beginning to fill with people. "Mama, get up," Addy urged as she turned from the window to look at Mama. "I think the war is over." Addy started jumping up and down. "I think Addy right, Ruth. That's got to be it," Papa said. He went over to Mama. She was crying, and so was Papa. Addy went to the bed and put her arms around them. "Don't cry," Addy said. But Addy was so happy, she thought she was going to cry too. Papa and Mama dried their eyes, and Mama said, "This mean we gonna get a chance to see Esther and Sam again. This the day we all been waiting for." "Come on, let's get dressed and go on out," Papa said. "I know I can't go back to sleep now." They all dressed quickly. As they rushed downstairs, they met some of the other boarders, half-dressed and talking excitedly. Addy, Papa, and Mama went outside. Someone in the crowded street yelled, "General Lee has surrendered!" Another cried, "The war is over! The North has won!" Addy looked back to the house and saw Madeir at a window. "Madeir," Addy called over the noise of the crowd, "I wish you could see all this." "In my way, I can," Madeir called back. Papa took Addy's hand and led her and Mama into the street. As they joined the crowd of people, someone handed them lanterns and banners. Hundreds of people, young and old, black and white, filled the street and sidewalks. They were crying and hugging, laughing and cheering. Some were still in their night clothes. They were beating pie tins and pots and pans. One man beat a drum, and another played a fiddle. Firecrackers popped all around them. Addy looked up to see flags and red, white, and blue bunting draped on buildings. "This just like a dream," Addy thought. She looked up at the huge banners being held on sticks high above the crowd. The banners waved gently in the breeze, and Addy began reading them aloud. "Lincoln and Liberty, one people, one country, America, North and South, united again." This was the day she had been waiting for. It was not perfect. If it were, her brother and sister would be right there with her. But this was the best day she could imagine without them. She turned to Mama and Papa. "I want today to be my birthday," Addy said. "You picked one fine day for it," Papa replied. "We should go on back home and have a party. The freezer I fixed is just waiting to make ice cream." As they made their way back home, Addy spotted some familiar faces in the crowd. Sarah and her parents. Addy rushed up to Sarah and threw her arms around her. "I can't believe it," Sarah cried out. "The war really over." "At last," Addy said. "And guess what?" She didn't give Sarah a chance to answer. "I'm having my birthday right now, and a party, and you and your mama and papa got to come." "Addy," laughed Sarah, "you sure picked a good birthday. The 9th of April is a day nobody will ever forget." When Addy's and Sarah's families arrived at the boarding house, every room was lit up. They went inside to find Mr. and Mrs. Golden, Madeir, and the boarders talking in the dining room. Papa made his way through the room, shaking hands and hugging everyone. Then he hopped up on a chair and made an announcement. "Today is my daughter's 10th birthday, and you all invited to a party right here in this dining room. I'm going to make a freezer full of ice cream." Everyone cheered, and Mama said, "Addy, you and Sarah stay out of the way till we get things set up for the party." "Mama, can we go out and jump rope till then?" asked Addy. Yes, but stay on the sidewalk right in front of the house, Mama said. And Papa, get started on that ice cream. If you don't, we'll be having it for breakfast. Outside, Addy and Sarah took turns jumping rope. Addy jumped better than she ever had before. Some people who were coming back from the celebration joined in their game, jumping in and missing and then trying again. Two strangers offered to turn the ropes for the girls so that Addy and Sarah could jump together, clapping to the rhythm of their jumping. "Listen to the ropes," Addy told them. "They singing out a rhythm." It didn't seem long before Mama came out to tell Addy and Sarah the scream was ready starting. The girls went inside. When Addy entered the dining room, she gasped, "Oh, Mama, it's so beautiful." Mrs. Golden and Mama was with pretty bowls and lavender glasses. There were shiny copper pitchers. Papa carried in the ice cream freezer. He removed the paddle from inside and began dishing out scoops of ice cream. Mrs. Golden brought in 2 cherry pies from the pie safe. "I was saving these for tomorrow's dinner," Mrs. Golden said. "But tonight is a real celebration for Addy and for all of us. We'll have them now." Mama led Addy to one table, and there at her place was a tin of Benny candies from Nadir. Nadir handed her something else wrapped in tissue paper. "You sure did pick a special day for your birthday," said Nadir. "This is from Sonny and me." Addy opened the gift to find 2 of Sonny's bright yellow feathers tied together with a bow. Addy held them gently, a bit of bright sunshine in the palm of her hand. "Thank you," Addy said. She pinned the feathers in her hair and kissed Nadir. "Let these remind you to always let your spirits sing out," said Nadir. "I will," promised Addy. "I will." Chapter 1. Seeds of Hope. Addy Walker stood in the middle of the garden with her eyes closed and her face tilted up to the late afternoon sun. She loved the feel of its warmth on her face. Papa called to Addy. "What you doing? Resting? You're supposed to be breaking up the ground so we can plant some seeds." Addy smiled at Papa. "I'm trying," she said, "but it's hard, Papa." "Of course it's hard," said Mama, who was working with a pitchfork. "Nothing good come easy." "I don't mean that kind of hard," said Addy. "I mean the ground real hard. I can't get my hoe to break through it." "Let me help you," Papa said. Addy, Mama, and Papa were working in a large garden about a mile from their boarding house. There wasn't enough room at the boarding house for a garden, so they had rented a small plot and were planting some vegetables and a few flowers. Other people had rented plots in the large garden, too. Addy watched as Papa easily broke through the surface of the ground with his shovel. The dirt on top was a lighter color than the dirt deeper down. Papa picked up a big clump of earth that was as dark as coffee. "Look how rich this earth is," Papa said. "We're going to harvest a heap of vegetables." Addy wiggled her bare toes in the earth Papa had turned over. It was cool and soft. "I wish we could plant some fruit, too," she said. "I sure would like some berries." "Well, we'll see," replied Papa. "Remember, we ain't planting this garden for ourselves. We're doing it to raise money." "I know," Addy said. The money they would make from selling their vegetables would help them in their search for her baby sister Esther and her older brother Sam. In the 2 months since the Civil War had ended, Addy, Papa, and Mama had tried hard to reunite their family. They had taken letters to aid societies, written to the Freedmen's Bureau, and placed an ad in the Christian Recorder newspaper. They had even sent a letter to Master Stevens's plantation, where they had been slaves, hoping someone would read it to Auntie Lula and Uncle Solomon. But they had not received any answers or any news about Esther or Sam. Now Papa was determined to go back to the plantation as soon as he could to get Esther and to find out where Sam might be. Papa would need money for his trip. Addy followed behind Papa, using her hoe to chop up the big chunks of earth he turned over. Every time she struck one of the chunks, her hands stung from the wooden handle rubbing against her skin. Sometimes she hit rocks hidden under the dirt, and she felt the hole bounce and jiggle in her hands. She dug out the rocks and loaded them into the wheelbarrow to get them out of the way. Clearing out a thick patch of weeds in the middle of the plot was the toughest work of all. The weeds came up as high as Addie's knees. Some of them had burrs that snagged her dress and dug into her skin. The weeds were stubborn, and Addie had to use all her strength to yank them out of the ground. Soon her back ached from bending over, and sweat ran down her face. "Let's stop and rest a bit," Mama said. She paused a moment to wipe sweat from her brow. "We can sit down and have our picnic supper." Mama had packed up their dinner from the boarding house and brought it to the garden. Addie was happy to think about supper and resting. Resting wasn't allowed back on the plantation. Addie shuddered, remembering her life when she was a slave. When she worked in the tobacco fields then, the overseer watched the slaves with a whip in his hand. They couldn't stop when they were tired or have a drink of water unless the overseer said they could. But it was different now. Mama spread an old blanket on the ground. As they ate and drank, Addie said, "If you had the chance to ask God a question, what would you ask?" "That's easy for me," answered Mama. "I would ask what we have to do to get our family together again. I'd ask how we can get Esther, Sam, Auntie Lula, and Uncle Solomon here, safe in Philadelphia with us." Addie turned to Papa. "What about you, Papa?" "I don't know, but I might ask how I got a daughter that asks so many questions," Papa said. He let out a loud chuckle. Mama and Addie laughed too. Then Addie said seriously, "I'd ask why there had to be slavery." "There didn't have to be slavery," Mama said. "People chose to have it. Folks do plenty of things they know is wrong." "If it wasn't for slavery, our whole family would be together," Addie said fiercely. "That's why I hate Master Stevens." "You know I don't like you talking that way," Mama scolded gently. "But I do hate him," Addie insisted. "Everything is his fault. He sold Papa and Sam away from us. Then you and I had to run away from him and leave Esther behind with Auntie Lula and Uncle Solomon." Papa spoke to Addie with understanding. "What you feeling right now is a lot of bitterness," he said. "I know, because I feel the same way sometimes. It's hard not to." He sighed. Then he went on to say, "But you got to know, Addie, anger and bitterness can be like weeds. If you let them grow, pretty soon they take over, and there ain't room for nothing else." Mama poured more water into Addie's drinking gourd. "I feel angry too sometimes," she said, "but I feel other things even stronger. I want to hold Esther in my arms and give Sam a big hug. I want to spend evenings talking to Auntie Lula and Uncle Solomon. I want—" Mama stopped talking and stared off into the distance. Addie moved closer to Mama. She knew how sad Mama was and how much she missed the rest of the family. Touching the cowrie shell on her necklace, Addie remembered what Mama had told her. This shell was a reminder to hold on to love for her family, even when she was far away from them. "I want us all to be back together too," Addie said softly. Papa stood up and held out his hand to help Mama stand up too. "Let's clear out the rest of these weeds," he said. "Then we can start planting." Addie worked steadily alongside Mama and Papa for another hour, stopping only to rub dirt on her hands to keep the handle of the hoe from slipping so much. When they finished weeding, Papa stretched long pieces of string from one end of the plot to the other to help lay out straight rows. Then he walked along one of the strings and used the hoe to make a furrow in the dirt. When they started planting, Addie knelt between Mama and Papa. She watched their hands carefully. Gently, they dropped seeds into the furrow, and then even more, they smoothed dirt over the seeds. Addie tried to be as careful as Mama and Papa. The seeds were precious, not just because they cost money, but because the plants that grew from these seeds would help her family be reunited. Addie knew she was planting seeds of hope. It took a long time to plant the seeds, and Addy was tired when she finally walked to the stream to wash her sore hands in the water. But it was the good tiredness that comes from doing an important job. "Papa," Addy said, "tomorrow is Saturday. I don't have school. Can I come work in the garden while you and Mama are at work?" "Mama and I got the day off tomorrow," said Papa, washing the dirt from his hands. "None of us gonna go to work tomorrow, in the garden or any place else. Don't you remember, Addy? Tomorrow the day of the big parade, the grand review." "But that parade gonna have only white soldiers marching in it," said Addy. "Why we got to go see them march?" "Because their fighting helped bring slavery to an end, that's why," Mama said. "And we should honor them for being brave." "Well, I hope when the colored soldiers come home they have a parade for them," said Addy. "They was brave too. If Sam ever got to be a soldier, I'm sure he was real brave." "I got no doubt about that," Papa said. "I ain't never known your brother to be scared of a thing. Sam is something special." "He brave and smart and funny," said Addy. "Remember how he was always riddling me? 'Riddle me this,' he'd say. 'What's smaller than a dog but can put a bear on the run?'" Papa laughed. "I got a riddle for you now," he said, as he gathered up the garden tools. "What's big and red and sinking fast? The sun. We better get back to the boarding house." "Can I stay a little longer?" asked Addy. "I want to water the seeds I planted." "All right," said Papa, "but come straight home soon as you finish." "I will," promised Addy. She filled up her watering can at the stream as Mama and Papa left. Then she walked slowly up and down the way, giving the seeds a generous drink of water. Addy felt as she watered. Her hands were still little, but she didn't mind. The seeds they had planted lay safe under the blanket of rich soil, and soon, with help, they would grow. "Well, well, if it isn't the little plantation girl," said a sharp Addy. He whirled to see Harriet standing at the edge of the plot, smirking at her. Harriet was a girl from her school whom she did not like. "You look right at home in that dirt patch," Harriet went on. "It ain't a dirt patch," Addy said. "It's a garden, a vegetable garden." "Vegetables?" asked Harriet. "What's the matter? Don't your parents make enough money to buy food for you to eat?" "We gonna sell the vegetables," said Addy proudly. "My papa gonna use the money to go back to the plantation to get my sister and look for my brother." "Oh, yes," said Harriet. "You told me about your lost brother. He's the one you think might have been a soldier." She smiled a superior smile. "My uncle served with distinction in the 3rd Infantry. He'll be home any day now. My mother says she expects he is a hero and will have the medals to prove it. We're going to have a big party for him." "My brother Sam coming home too, someday," said Addy stubbornly. "I'm sure of it." Harriet shrugged to show that she did not care. "Well, I shouldn't keep you from your dirt patch. I mean, your garden," she said, and she flounced away. Addy watched her go, feeling hurt and angry and jealous. If only she knew as much about Sam as Harriet knew about her uncle. Addy gathered her hoe and her watering can and headed home. The sun had fallen behind the buildings, and the evening air was cold. When Addy got back to the boarding house, she washed her hands carefully. Mama had set out a sheet of paper, a pen, and an inkwell on the table for Addy to write another letter about Esther and Sam. Addy knew the supplies cost precious money. She didn't want to make any mistakes when she wrote because that would be wasteful. Mama and Papa sat next to Addy at the table and reminded her of what she should say. "You got to remember to say where we last saw everybody," Mama said. "That's right," said Papa. "And make sure you tell how they can find us here in Philadelphia." "And don't forget to say we love them all," Mama reminded Addy. Addy smiled. "I won't leave that part out," she said, as she dipped her pen in the ink and carefully began writing. Mama and Papa watched as she wrote, their faces full of concern. Scritch, scratch. Addy moved the pen across the paper. She knew the words she wrote were nothing more than shapes to Papa, who could not read or write. When she finished, she read the letter to her parents. "That's real nice, Addy," Mama said. Papa nodded. "You write real good," he said. "We'll take the letter to the Quaker Aid Society first thing in the morning before the parade." Addie held the letter in her hands for a moment. She thought about Harriet's knowing where her uncle was. Harriet could send her uncle a letter any time she wanted to. This letter got to get to somebody who knows something about Esther and Sam, Addie thought. It's just got to. Then she folded the letter carefully. She hoped the letter, like the seeds she planted in the garden, would help her family be together again. Chapter 2. Hope and Determination. Saturday morning dawned bright and blue. Addie felt hopeful as she walked along between Mama and Papa. They were all dressed in their Sunday best in honor of the Grand Review. Before they went to the parade, they were going to the Quaker meeting hall to deliver their letter. Outside the meeting hall, Papa took off his hat and checked to be sure the letter was safe in his coat pocket. They went inside and walked to a small room in the back of the hall where the Quaker Aid Society had its office. "Good morning," a pleasant voice called to them. It was Mr. Cooper, who had helped them on other visits, his face beaming with a smile. Addie smiled back at him. She liked Mr. Cooper. He was a little man with thick, curly blonde hair and a kind manner. "It's good to see you all again."